Detected.
Hey, I'm Retro Rob, and welcome to Coin Detected, where we dive into the history and legacy of 80s video arcade games and the people who built them. Visit coindetected.com to listen to the latest episode. The year is 1986, and today's game is 720. You heard that right. The title of the game is literally 720, often written as 700, 20 degrees with a degree symbol. That symbol isn't just for show. It refers to the ultimate skateboarding stunt of spinning a full 720 degrees in midair, 2 complete rotations off a ramp. In the mid-80s skateboarding world, landing a 720 was a legendary feat, so it made perfect sense for Atari Games to name their groundbreaking skateboarding game after it. Some people just call the game 720, or even Skate or Die, but 720 is the official name on the arcade cabinet. And what a cabinet it was. This machine really looked the part of an extreme skate culture icon, with a big boombox-style speaker on top, blasting music, and vibrant skate sticker-style artwork all over. Even the marquee featured that 720 logo in bold graffiti-like lettering. It was as if an MTV skate video had been transformed into an arcade cabinet, grabbing your attention from across the arcade. Atari Games clearly wanted to capture the eyes and ears of every teen skater in 1986, and it worked. Now, 720 was developed and released by Atari Games, the arcade division of Atari, in late 1986. To set the scene, this was peak skateboarding boom time, the era of the Bones Brigade videos, neon skate fashion, and guys like Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero becoming rising stars in pop culture. Arcades were still huge, and Atari Games, based in sunny California, was known for creative hits like Paperboy and Gauntlet. Seeing the skateboarding craze, Atari wanted to translate that energy into a game. In fact, the idea for 720 reportedly came from an Atari technician named Rob Rowe, who was also a skater. Rob pitched the concept of an ambitious skateboarding game that could capture the tricks, style, and skate or die attitude of the sport. Management gave it the green light, and a talented team formed around him to make it happen. The project was led by John Salwitz and Dave Ralston, the same duo behind Paperboy, with Salwitz as the lead programmer, designer, and Ralston on game and playfield design. They brought in Paul Quinn as another software programmer, Sam Comstock, Mark West, and Will Noble as artists animators, and audio by Brad Fuller with music from Hal Cannon and Earl Vickers. This was one of Atari's all-star teams, many of them fresh off other hits, and they would need every ounce of their talent because 720 turned out to be one of the most challenging projects of its time. Right from the start, the developers aimed high. They weren't just making a simple trick demo. They envisioned 720 as a sort of open-world skateboarding adventure in an arcade cabinet. Imagine that. In an era dominated by single-screen or linear games, 720 gave players a scrolling isometric city to skate around freely. They called it Skate City, essentially a big neighborhood hub full of ramps, sidewalks, parks, and shops. You could skate wherever you wanted, doing jumps and spins off park benches and sidewalks, which was pretty mind-blowing in 1986. The goal was to rack up points by performing tricks in the city, which would earn you tickets to enter one of 4 skate park events situated at the edges of the world. There were 4 types of events: ramp, downhill, slalom, and jump, each essentially a different minigame, and you'd cycle through these as you progressed to higher skill levels. The structure was innovative. It had 4 classes or levels of difficulty, each containing the 4 events, making a total of 16 events to conquer. No other arcade game had done a multi-event sports progression quite like this at the time, especially not with an open hub world tying it all together. To make all this come together, the team had some serious technical hurdles. Atari's standard hardware of the early 80s couldn't handle the scrolling and complexity they wanted, so 720 was built on Atari's new System 2 hardware. This was the same platform that powered Championship Sprint and Paperboy, but 720 pushed it even further. Notably, they upgraded to a medium-resolution monitor, a 25-inch display, which was huge and sharp for the time. Most games still used 19-inch standard res monitors. The higher resolution, 512 x 384 pixels allowed for more detailed graphics in that big city and smoother scrolling. The main CPU running the show was a rather unusual choice. A DX-T11 16-bit processor, essentially a PDP-11 minicomputer CPU on a chip, clocked at 10 MHz. This gave the game decent computing muscle for 1986. The sound hardware was also beefy. They included a Yamaha YM2000 151 FM synthesizer for music, and not one but two Atari Pokey sound chips for sound effects. On top of that, to get that now famous voice that yells "skate or die," they used a Texas Instruments TMS 5000 220 speech chip, the same chip used in games like Gauntlet for voice. This cocktail of tech allowed 720 to have catchy music, digitized speech, and rich sound effects all at once, which was cutting edge. The game featured 13 unique music tracks, energetic chiptune songs with a punk rock skate attitude. In fact, the soundtrack was such a standout that Atari reportedly released it on a promotional flexi-disc record, making it one of the first video game soundtracks ever released to the public in any format. Imagine a floppy vinyl sheet in a magazine with arcade music. That's pure 80s nostalgia right there. But perhaps the most innovative piece of technology in 720 was the controller. This game didn't use a typical joystick. Oh no, it had what looked like a joystick, but in reality it was a special rotary joystick that you could spin continuously 360 degrees. It was mounted at a 45-degree angle, and it wasn't an analog wheel or a simple 8-way stick. It was a sort of steerable joystick that always sprung back to center, but allowed rapid spinning input. The developers knew that to simulate skate tricks, the player would need to spin their on-screen skater around smoothly and quickly. A normal digital joystick wouldn't cut it for that kind of rotation-based control. So Atari's control engineer Jack Acknan devised this hybrid controller, essentially a joystick atop a rotary encoder. The effect was that you didn't push in the direction you wanted to move like other games. Instead, you spun the stick around as if rotating your skater's heading. It's a bit like the control scheme of Ikari Warriors or Time Soldiers, which had rotary knobs for aiming. But here the rotation is the primary movement mechanic. This control was so unique that it makes 720 tough to play properly on any home emulator or port without that original stick. Your whole body gets into it. Seasoned players literally spin the stick furiously to do 360s and 720s, making 720 one of the most physical arcade video games ever. That became part of the fun. The controls themselves felt like a skate trick to master. It also meant the designers had to ensure the joystick could survive this abuse. They built it robustly, thankfully, but it's still common for collectors to have to repair the rotary mechanism after years of use. With advanced hardware, a big vision, and a new control scheme, 720's development became an 18-month marathon of innovation. For context, most arcade games then were developed in maybe 6 to 12 months, so this was a long project. A lot of that time went into research and refinement. The team was determined to nail the skateboarding feel and look. They didn't just rely on imagination, they actually went out and recorded real skaters in action. According to an interview the devs gave to Thrasher magazine, yes, the skateboarder's Bible, in early 1987, the Atari crew first filmed a major half-pipe competition called Terror in Tahoe in 1985 to study how skaters moved. Not completely satisfied, they went even further. They built a half-pipe ramp in an Atari warehouse in Sunnyvale, California. They basically said, all right, if we're going to animate a dude skating, we need to see it up close. So they invited local pro skaters, guys like Andy Berenson, Corey O'Brien, Steve Caballero, Keith Meek, Rob Roskop, and others from the Bay Area scene to come do skate sessions at Atari's facilities. Can you imagine the scene? Arcade engineers and programmers in their lab coats, watching legendary skaters shred a half-pipe between rows of arcade cabinets and electronics. The animators took video and likely did a form of rotoscoping, tracing animations from the footage, which is why the tricks in 720 look so surprisingly authentic for pixel art. The result was silky smooth kickflips, handplants, and spins that real skaters recognized as genuine. This was a big deal. Many skateboarding games, even years later, had clunky or off-the-mark animations, but 720 really captured the style of mid-80s vert skating. One skater might bail in the game and strike a pose that looks exactly like a fall you saw in a Powell Peralta skate video. That's no accident. It's the product of that research. All that effort even spilled into the game's art and attitude. The city in 720 is littered with graffiti and stickers, many of them actually hiding the initials or nicknames of the developers and artists. For example, you can find the letters DR scrawled on a ramp, a nod to designer Dave Ralston. It's like they all tagged the game world as their way of saying, "We were here," just as real skaters would tag a skate spot. In fact, it's said to be one of the first games where the dev team digitally tagged the environment with their graffiti signatures. And if you dig even deeper, there's a hidden Easter egg in the code itself. The text, "John Salwitz was here Atari," all one word, is buried in the game's program as a little vanity signature by programmer John Salwitz. The whole game is infused with that punk skate culture vibe. You've got in-game ads for fictional skate shops, a giant ghetto blaster on the cabinet pumping out tunes, and of course the stern voice that growls, "Skate or die" at you if you loiter too long. That phrase became a mantra. It was so catchy that another company, Electronic Arts, even used "Skate or Die" as the title of their own skate game on home computers a couple years later. And speaking of the skate or die mechanic, we have to talk about those infamous killer bees. Yes, killer bees. 720 wasn't content to just let you leisurely skate around. The designers wanted to keep that arcade urgency, so they implemented a timer in the Skate City hub. If you dilly-dally too long without entering an event, the game issues a warning. Skate or die. And soon a swarm of angry bees, or hornets, or whatever stinging menace they are, comes flying after your skater. It's brilliantly over the top. A warning message flashes, the tension music kicks in, and suddenly you're fleeing for your life down the streets as this buzzing swarm homes in. If the bees catch you, your game is over, unless you pop in another quarter to continue. In-universe, we might say these are skateboarder-hating bees, as one description put it, maybe disturbed from a hive you bailed into, but really, it's an imaginative way to pressure the player. The message was clear: keep moving, keep skating, or you're toast. In practical terms, it forced players to balance their time between racking up points in the city and getting into the next skate park event before time ran out. That constant race against time gave 720 a frantic, adrenaline-pumping edge. Many a novice player's run would end in a panic as they desperately tried to reach an event gate with the bees hot on their heels, only to hear then see their avatar flail in defeat. For players, it was equal parts stressful and exhilarating, a true embodiment of skate or die. Now, once you did make it into a skate park event, 720 switched up the gameplay to 4 distinct styles. Ramp. Here you're in a half-pipe, old-school pool style. The goal is to get as much air as possible and perform tricks for points. You move back and forth, building momentum, and you can spin in the air or do flips. It ends when time's up, and you hopefully earned enough for at least a bronze medal. This event really showcased the rotation mechanic. Good players could actually pull off a 720 spin in mid-air in this half-pipe, which was super satisfying and worthy of big points. Downhill. This is like a downhill racing course. You see your skater from a sort of angled top-down view, zooming through a park course with hills, turns, and obstacles. It's all about getting to the finish line as fast as possible. It feels a bit like Atari's Paperboy. No surprise, same designers, mixed with a racing game. The faster your time, the more points you score. Slalom, an obstacle course with flags. You have to weave through yellow gates on a winding path. Each gate you successfully pass gives a little bonus and adds a bit of time. Missing gates doesn't crash you, but you lose out on points and time. It's a test of precision control, and by the way, doing this with a spinning joystick is tricky but fun. Cross the finish, and your remaining time converts to points. Jump. This one's pretty wild. You launch off a series of ramps, trying to hit a bullseye target that's off-screen at the end. There are cryptic little marks on the final ramp that hint at where the target is. You kind of have to time your jump and angle to land in the right spot. It's almost like a leap of faith. If you nail the landing, which is tough, you score big. Each event awards a bronze, silver, or gold medal depending on your performance, and with it, some cash prize and points. Points go toward your score and earning more tickets, while cash can be spent on equipment upgrades, another forward-thinking feature of 720. Scattered around Skate City are skate shops where you can buy better gear, a new board for more speed, better shoes for higher jumps, pads for quicker recovery from wipeouts, and helmets to allow riskier tricks without bailing as easily. Yes, this arcade game from 1986 had an RPG-like upgrade system. If you had the money, you could significantly improve your skater's abilities, which would be essential to survive the later class events. For example, the Class 4 parks are brutal, tighter time limits, higher scores needed. Without some upgrades, you'd have a really hard time winning gold medals there. So, how did players approach this game? 720 was very challenging, something even the developers acknowledged. It had a steep learning curve due to the unusual controls and the time pressure. If you just jumped on it without a plan, chances are you'd be overwhelmed by the bees and the demands of the skate parks. But dedicated players in the late 80s, especially those who were skaters themselves, fell in love with the challenge and developed deep strategies. One common expert tactic is point pressing in the city. Essentially, maximize your score in Skate City before entering a park, but without pushing your luck too far. For instance, a daring approach is to keep pulling tricks on the streets until the last possible moment when the skate or die bees are about to get you, then dart into a park gate at the very last second. This yields a ton of extra points because you spent more time doing tricks, which in turn yields more tickets for subsequent rounds. But it's high risk, wait a hair too long, and the bees catch you. Top players basically memorized exactly how long they could stay out. Another technique involves knocking over pedestrians for points. Yes, the city is populated with other characters like breakdancers, bikers, even a bodybuilder, and if you bump into them, or jump over them in some cases, you earn bonus points. One fan quipped that in 720, you earn 500 points from knocking over a bodybuilder, and isn't that a place we'd all like to live in? A tongue-in-cheek commentary on the game's quirky world. Now, the most famous trick or exploit in 720 has to do with the half-pipe, ramp event. In that event, skilled players discovered you could effectively grind the lip of the ramp for huge points, essentially an infinite scoring glitch if done right. The trick is, get up to the top edge of the half-pipe, then instead of doing a normal turn, you hold the joystick at just the right angle parallel to the ramp and stop pressing the kick button. This causes your skater to go into a sliding grind along the coping of the half-pipe and then skid back down. The game's physics freak out a bit and reward you a chunk of points for the grind and again when you reach the bottom. If you time it correctly, you can repeat this over and over, essentially racking up a gold medal worth of points in one continuous trick. It's not an official cheat code or anything, more like a physics quirk that became a pro tactic. Players dubbed it the gold medal grind. Some world record chasers used this to push the high scores to extreme levels. The designers probably didn't intend for you to cheese the ramp this way, but hey, emergent play is part of arcade history. Aside from that, other tips from the experts include buying equipment early. Don't hoard your money. Spend it to upgrade so you can survive later parks, and focusing on certain events. One strategy is to keep going to the Sessions skate park, the blue-colored ramp park, as often as possible because it could net huge points if you've mastered the ramp trick. The more times you loop through Sessions and nail a big score, the higher your total will climb. A truly great run on 720 will leave the player physically exhausted, which is something players actually say, because you're constantly spinning that joystick and mashing those buttons in a fight against the clock. With such depth and difficulty, 720 developed a bit of a cult following. It wasn't as immediately pick up and play as, say, Pac-Man, but those who got into it became almost evangelical about it. When it hit arcades in late 1986 and into 1987, it drew attention for its flashy cabinet and novel concept. Atari Games even marketed it directly to the skateboarding crowd, They took out a full-color ad in Thrasher magazine, which usually never did game ads, featuring pro skater Steve Caballero endorsing the game. That's how you know they were targeting the core skate audience, not just arcade rats. The game's own attract mode would shout "Skate or Die" in arcades, which certainly turned heads. Was 720 an instant mega hit? Not on the scale of something like Double Dragon or Street Fighter. It was a bit too niche for that, but it did very well. It was reportedly one of the hottest arcade titles through 1987 and 1988 during the skate craze. For many players, especially those of us who skated or loved the skate scene, this game was the real deal. It felt authentic and thrilling. There truly was nothing like 720 in arcades at the time. It basically stood alone in the skateboarding genre for years. It wasn't until a decade later that another arcade skate game, like Sega's Top Skater in 1997, would arrive, long after 720 had set the template. In retrospect, we can say 720 was one of the first extreme sports video games ever, arriving well before snowboarding, BMX, or skating games became mainstream. Collectors today hold 720 in high esteem. The dedicated arcade cabinet, with its unique controls and large speakers, is a prized showpiece. It's also big and heavy, so that has kept it somewhat rare in private collections. Atari manufactured about 2,265 units of 720 for the US market, which is a decent number. So the game isn't ultra rare, but finding one in good condition is another story. Between the complex joystick that can wear out, the medium-res monitor, and the sheer weight, those giant speakers and wood add heft, fully restoring one can be a labor of love. One collector on an arcade forum noted that 720 will always have a markup, compared to similar games, precisely because it's so unique. 100% unique in its style, cabinet design, gameplay, music, control scheme, he said, and also because it was the very first true skateboarding game and retains a strong nostalgic pull for 80s skaters. Many 40-something skaters today seek this machine not just for the game, but for what it represents, that brief time when their two passions, skateboarding and arcade gaming, perfectly collided. That cross-appeal, gamers and skaters, means demand is pretty high relative to supply. Price guides put a nice 720 cabinet in the upper tier of value, and indeed units have been known to sell for a couple $1,000s to eager collectors. However, it's worth noting that it's not considered ultra-rare. One database of collectors shows around 192 owned units and labels it very common among classics. So they're out there. It's more that people hold on to them. In any case, collectors uniformly agree it's a challenging game to master, but a jewel to own. While 720 never had an official arcade sequel, its legacy is evident. The phrase "skate or die" became part of gaming lexicon, and the game's design influenced later titles. You can draw a line from 720 to the likes of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series in the late 90s. Those games also had a timed run structure, multiple skating events, street, vert, etc., and high-scoring trick combos, albeit in a much more advanced form. It's touching to know that a young Tony Hawk himself reportedly played 720 back in the day, perhaps dreaming of the virtual skate feats that would come later. Culturally, 720 proved that skateboarding could be successfully captured in a video game, paving the way for the flood of extreme sports games in the 90s and beyond. It also showed arcade designers that players enjoyed a bit of free-roaming choice and progression in their games, something that wasn't common until then. The open-world hub of 720 was a precursor to more open designs in later arcade titles. And let's not forget the influence on game audio. With its pumping soundtrack and cabinet speakers, 720 was arguably an early example of an arcade game trying to provide a full audio-visual experience, not just gameplay. As one fan noted, when you heard those energetic tunes blasting from that big boombox cabinet, it pulled you into the world of the game completely. In a very literal sense, 720 turned heads and opened ears in the arcade. Before we wrap up, we have to talk about world records and high scores on 720, because this game has a storied history in the competitive scene. The scoring in 720 maxes out at some point if you loop enough, but it's still very challenging to approach the cap. The first officially recognized world record on 720 was set way back on June 17, 1987, by a gentleman named Ron Perelman, who scored 527,100 points. That score stood tall for an astonishing length of time. Many top players came close. You needed near-perfect execution of all the tricks and strategies, maybe even exploiting that ramp glitch to get there. Decades later, in the age of online scoreboards, competitors continued to chase that high mark. In fact, just recently, nearly 35-plus years later, a new world record was achieved, finally surpassing Perelman's score. In 2023, competitive arcade gamer Jeff Civitate, managed to push the record up to 536,200 points, edging out the long-standing score. Imagine dedicating 15 years to mastering one game. Jeff did, and he finally took the crown. It speaks to the enduring appeal of 720 that players are still honing their skills on it well into the 21st century. And for the record, no pun intended, 720 has earned some nice honors. It's often listed among the top classic sports arcade games and is fondly remembered in retrospectives. It might not have the mainstream fame of Pac-Man, but within arcade enthusiast circles, 720 is a legend, a game that did something truly different in 1986 and pulled it off with style. As we finish our 360, or should I say 720, around this topic, it's clear that 720 stands as an intelligent and innovative fusion of technical prowess and youth culture in arcade form. It's a game that combined the brains, new hardware, clever programming, unique controls, with the heart of 80s skateboarding, the music, the attitude, the risk-reward thrill. The people who built it, from John Sawitz and Dave Ralston to the unsung engineers and even the skateboarders who lent their moves, poured passion into it. And that's something you can still feel when you play it today. Whether you're a tech-savvy gamer appreciating its design or a nostalgic former skater feeling that rush of skate or die again. As one collector aptly summed up, the game is 100% unique. It has gained a well-deserved following among many of us aging 80s skaters that remember it. So, next time you see a 720 machine, perhaps in a local arcade bar or a retro gaming expo, give it a try. Grab that joystick, spin it like you mean it, and imagine it's 1986 again, with neon-clad skaters cheering you on. Just remember, keep an eye on that timer, listen for the buzz of those bees, and by all means, skate or die. This is Retro Rob, signing off. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Coin Detected. Keep those quarters handy, stay rad, and I'll catch you on the next one. Coin Detected, game over. Insert coin to continue.
The sequence is complete. Game over.